An ancient home with a bloody past tears a family apart as they race against time to defeat the spirits that torment them.
Don't Listen is a 2020 Spanish ghost story available on Netflix. Today, we'll be recapping and reviewing this horror drama film, so make sure you stick around till the very end.
We see a dirty swimming pool as eerie, ominous music plays, and the scene pans out to reveal a large, beautiful home. Inside the home is Eric, a 9-year-old boy, being interviewed by his psychologist, Dr. Carroll. He's scared about moving to their new home, and he tells her that he hears voices in the house that often wake him up, and he can't tell her what they say to him. His psychologist speaks to his parents, Sarah and Daniel, and she explains that their son has a big imagination and is probably just upset about having to move home. Meanwhile, up in his room, Eric is watching but is drawn away and hears a strange static on his walkie-talkie. Eric's psychologist is driving away as her radio turns to static. Unknown to her, a fly lands on her ear and climbs inside it. She feels the painful sensation, and suddenly her eyes fill with blood as she speeds off the road. Eric has drawn a picture of a bloody tree branch, and as we cut back to his psychologist, we see she has crashed into a tree, brutally impaling her face on a long branch. The bug crawls out of her ear and flies away.
Daniel is renovating his giant new home when he spots a large area of mold underneath the stairs, with a swarm of flies crawling all around it. Never a good sign in a new house.
Eric radios and asks for his dad to come and help get his red ball out of the pool. Daniel helps him before he's called for his bath. We know bathrooms are never a good place to be in a horror movie. Eric is bathing when the radio over the shower head starts to whistle with static. It stops when his mom comes to wash his hair. She notices he has 3 nasty scratches on his arm, but just presumes he got them from the cat. Eric asks if it's true that his dad hates him, and Sarah is stunned. She asks where he heard this, and he says over the walkie-talkie. In bed that night, Daniel is watching a famous psychic who has written a book being interviewed on TV when Sarah asks if he said anything mean to Eric. Daniel shrugs it off. He'll probably be fine once they've settled in and he's started at school. The rusty pool gate was noisy that night and it woke Daniel up. He goes downstairs to lock it and he heads back upstairs. He hears Eric's voice on the walkie-talkie speaking to someone and saying he's tired. Meanwhile, upstairs, Eric's toy robot springs to life. The loud robotic noises cause him to jump. As he turns it off, he catches a glimpse of something strange behind his curtain. He pulls back feet, a pair of black feet. He slowly looks up and sees an ominous black shadow behind the net curtains, breathing raspily. He runs and hides under his covers with his fingers in his ears. He waits for the danger to be gone before his dad pulls the covers off him in a classic jump scare moment. Sarah puts Eric at ease and notices that Daniel has picked up a nasty wound in the middle of his hand. The following day, work continues on the house and Daniel sees that spraying bug killer on the black mark hasn't done anything and flies are still crawling in and out of the hole. Sarah and Eric arrive home early from school. Eric was expelled from school on his first day. Sarah says he ran from the class, hid in a cupboard, and bit the teacher. She also says from now on Dr. Carroll will be coming to see him every day. Out of nowhere, Eric says that Dr. Carroll is dead, and both his parents are stunned. He says the voice told him, and his dad sends him to his room. On the phone with the doctors, Daniel learns that Dr. Carroll's car did go off the road, learning that she died. To try and understand what's going on with Eric, his dad brings him a sandwich and asks him who he was talking to last night. Eric says he was talking to Daniel, which Daniel says is impossible. That night, the clanking pool gate wakes the parents up again, so Sarah sends Daniel away to close it. When he gets downstairs, he finds the front door wide open. He gets his shotgun and calls to see if anyone's there, but no one replies. Upstairs, Sarah goes to Eric's room and finds he's not in his bed. Daniel finds Eric's pajama top outside and makes a mad dash for the swimming pool, calling his name. He finds him dead in the pool.
Now this is a genuine surprise for us, as the film has been clearly setting up Eric to be the protagonist. So this is a really good pull the rug out from underneath you moment.
Time passes and Sarah and Daniel come home from Eric's funeral and try to come to terms with their horrible loss. Before Sarah leaves for some time alone, they try to think about what they're going to do now. They can't afford to leave home as they've invested all their money into the renovation, so they're stuck there until it's done. Alone at home, Daniel watches a family video of them arriving at the house. When he turns it off, he hears a distant creaking somewhere in the home. He picks up the walkie-talkie and speaks into it, hoping someone will reply, but of course, he doesn't hear anything. Once he sets it down and leaves, it seems to crackle to life. Speaking to Sarah the next day, he replays a voice note he sent to Sarah the night before and, to his shock, hears Eric pleading for help hidden in the static. He decides to go to a book signing of the psychic German he saw on the television and insists he listens to the recordings that has somehow captured Eric's voice. He tells him that when Eric speaks in the tape, it does not affect the waveform when he plays it back. This phenomenon convinces German to come to their home. He arrives the next day with his assistant Sophia and daughter Ruth. Daniel explains the events leading up to Eric's death. Ruth starts by setting up cameras and audio equipment around the home as they begin their detection process to get to the bottom of this case.
Ruth says they need Daniel to get out of Eric's room. She can see him on the infrared camera, but Daniel isn't in the house. He's outside.
German detects a strange ethereal humming through his headphones and follows the source of it up to Eric's room. He tries to contact Sophia, but he's losing reception in Eric's room, and the radio just crackles and fizzles. Sophia says he needs to get out of the room and that she can see something behind him. Later, the three of them are looking at the footage and they can see a shape standing behind German in the room. German is excited, and while Ruth is skeptical, he's excited to keep trying tomorrow. That night, German awakes from a nightmare and hears a sound in his room, and we see what looks like a face in the darkness. He goes downstairs and sees a vision of his wife illuminated by daylight. He knows he must be dreaming, but the vision is so peaceful and convincing. Sitting at the table, his wife takes a knife and begins running it over his arm repeatedly. Sophia comes into the room and snaps him out of it, and he realizes his wife has gone and that he's been cutting his own arm. Meanwhile, Sarah gets on a phone call, and to her surprise, it's Eric on the other side. He's pleading with her to come and save him, that a bad man wants to do him harm. As Ruth steps out onto the balcony the following morning, to her horror she finds dozens of cats strung up by their necks and hanging from the branches of a tree. German begins to understand that whatever is happening here might be a trick of some evil spirit plays. He tells him this while Daniel is burying the cats just as Sarah arrives home and is suitably upset to find a strange man in her home and cats being buried in the garden. Investigating the mysterious phone call, Sarah searches Eric's room but finds nothing. As she leaves, his robot toys spring to life and she turns around to see him sitting there holding it. She slowly approaches him, but as she draws near, he curls underneath the bed, and when she looks underneath it, she sees the same pair of feet that terrified Eric, but looking above the bed, she sees no one. Eric appears from under the bed and she crawls away, only to put her hand on the same rotting feet. A gnarled hand with black nails grabs her face. Downstairs, the other three discuss how cats hanging from the tree is a warning from the Middle Ages set by a witch to warn people away. Without warning, Sarah's body comes crashing through the kitchen window. She's hung herself. We see a fly crawl out of her ear.
After emergency services take the body away, Sophia pleads with her father to leave, but he insists that they stay. This is the mystery that he's been trying to solve his entire career.
Daniel grieves in Eric's room and sees the shape of his wife cradling his child behind the plastic tarp. As he pulls it away, they vanish, and he's attacked by the same figure who killed them both, who vanishes as quickly as she disappeared. German and Ruth watch the tape of Sarah hanging herself and see another figure in the room with her. A bang from upstairs leads them to Eric's room, where Daniel is hysterical and toting his shotgun. German calms him down and tells him there must be some kind of dungeon in the house where the witches who were brought here used to be tortured. Daniel thinks he knows where it might be. Hacking open the rotting hole beneath the stairs, they find themselves in a dark, forbidding series of caves that haven't had any visitors in hundreds of years. They find a tortured body in a gibbet. Her tongue and teeth have all been removed. German says they have to bury the body, and while he goes off to get fuel, they hear screaming from the caves. German hears more screams and chants as his torch flickers, and the shape of the executed witch appears before him. Upstairs, Ruth too is visited by the ghost of her mother, but we know that isn't really her, and she senses it too. She refuses to hug this vision, and her mother lowers her arms and vanishes into the shadows. Sophia is then pursued on all sides by visions of the witch hovering in the air, shrieking and reaching out for her. In the workshop, looking for fuel, another vision of his family appears, and they ask him not to burn the body or he won't see them anymore. He hugs them both, but from another angle, we see he's simply hugging an apparition of the witch. As German douses the witch's body in fuel, Ruth appears behind him under the witch's thrall. She stabs German with a box cutter, but he knocks her aside and uses the gun to shoot the corpse, setting it alight and releasing her. Daniel, who is also dousing himself in fuel, is released from his spell. The following day, German is recovering from his wounds and speaking with Ruth. He's happy to have finally found the closure that spirits exist and that it has brought him closer to understanding his wife's senseless death.
He also says an old priest, who's a friend of his, wants him to go and interview a girl who might be possessed. Now this feels like they might be setting up a horror franchise.
In Eric's room, Daniel finds his son's drawings, all of them predicting the deaths throughout the film. The psychologist, the cats, and his wife, but there is a new one that stuns him. In a daze, he walks to the pool. Flashes of the night when his son drowned are intercut as he walks listlessly to the pool. We see the witch whispering in Daniel's ear and discover he dragged Eric to the pool that night and drowned him. This horrific discovery is unbearable, and Daniel puts the shotgun to his head and pulls the trigger. Hearing the blast, Ruth runs to the pool to find Daniel's body facing down in the water as the blood pool spreads around him. She screams and the camera spirals up into the air above the pool, leaving us just how it started.
Spanish filmmakers are always especially good at making ghost stories, but the movie Don't Listen feels much too similar to the everyday American style of horror films, such as Insidious or The Conjuring, only not quite as skillful. It relies mainly on jump scares, which are so common that they soon just stop being surprising. And despite how tragic the story is around Daniel's family, the story isn't nearly as sad or as memorable as it probably should have been. And the villainous witch, she barely features. I mean, it's just a series of jump scares, and we need more than that to make her a truly threatening villain. While most Spanish chillers are great, this has a particular Netflixy vibe, if you know what I mean. And while that makes it entertaining enough, it lacks all the impact of the Spanish spook tales. Please subscribe to our channel to be notified when we upload. And don't forget to suggest movies that you want us to recap in the future in the comments down below.